Hello, Jason. I want to talk about communism for a bit and give sort of my feedback on how to achieve communism and get your reaction because from what I understand, and this is like what Karl Marx proposed. Karl Marx did propose the idea of creating a statist system to achieve communism, sort of like the idea is creating a government to eventually remove all governments, which it doesn't really make sense to me because it hasn't worked in the past, and that's kind of why I see communist or why I see communist governments as eventually being authoritarian and dictating in the way that capitalist governments are too. So this is sort of my ideas as to why the only way to achieve communism is to have anarchist communism. You know, you talk about the communes that did spring up in China, and I believe you in the sense that that I think that you actually I think that they actually did occur. I haven't done the research on them, so I can't exactly say that I totally agree with it, but if you've done the research and you believe it, I can believe that there are certain communes that did actually achieve full communism in China. However, I think that the real problem that Marx had, as opposed to Mikhail Bakunin, and this was sort of a contentious issue between them, is the idea of creating a state to act as a transition point to achieving a stateless and moneyless and classless society. You know, you talk about these places in China that sprung up and actually did become truly communist until the state basically took them over and instituted statist control. And I believe, and this is just me, that if you're going to have a national party, this is the idea of nationalism. You know, you have the idea of China as one government, one system. You're not going to have a national party that's going to eventually learn to dissolve itself, particularly if you come to a one-party system. So the way that I see things is that communism can really only come from the community level. They can't ever come from the national or state level. It has to be an individual. It has to be a selection or a determination from the communities to make communism. You can't have nationalized communism because you look at Russia, which was basically not communist. I mean, it was communist. It had communist ideals, but it became sort of this statist system that became totalitarian, authoritarian, and basically told people how to live their lives. And when you have a national government, in the case of the USSR, or in the case of like Vietnam or North Korea or China or Cuba, these parties, this is the corrupting influence of politics. This is the corrupting influence of power, and it's happened time and time and time again. So it's, I don't understand how statist communists, people that believe there needs to be this transition point from capitalism to socialism to communism. I don't see how that will ever work, because communism, if you're going to try to achieve that on a nationwide or a statist level, I don't see that creating political parties as a way to abolish eventually political parties. Nobody historically, apart from maybe Mao did actually try to reinforce the ideals of like sort of a continuous revolution. He understood that there were contradictions within communism that needed to be reconciled, and I really respect him for that, because I think that he understood a lot of the way that power and politics works. Unfortunately, with Mao, as with pretty much everybody who claims to be a leader, they die eventually. And then once they die, then you have the party, and the party then will select, at least in communism, the way that it works is that the party selects the new leader, and political parties can be dangerous in the sense that they exist for the continuation of the party, or they exist for the continuation of the state, right? They sort of exist based on fear, and the fear of, like, let's say, returning to capitalism, and they become authoritarian, and they don't like political opposition. The way that I would view that communism would have to be created is through nonviolent means. First of all, violent revolutions can be, if they're successful, as soon as you inject violence into the situation, and as soon as you inject aggression, you can't uninject it. It's part of the system. As soon as you create a violent overthrow, and so the way that I see that communism should be created is that we already exist in a capitalist society. At least I do here in the United States, and I think that basically we have to acknowledge, first of all, anarchism, the idea that each person owns themselves, that a monopoly of violence is not justified because each person does own themselves, and so you would have to create sort of a downfall of government first. Government would have to be abolished, and then people would have to resist a new government springing up. And then you would have in individual communities, you would have sort of these general assemblies where you figure out how you're going to create, or what kind of monetary and political and economic system you're going to create. And it's a matter of convincing the individual people in the community that these, the individual private property owners, to give up their property to the community, and convince them that's the way to go. If you don't convince them, then you've not really done your job in promoting communism. You got to convince them. You can't point a gun to their head and tell them to give up all their stuff. It's got to be a system of education, and it's got to be a system of making people realize that all really is for all. And if you can convince people to say that, provided that you contribute to the community, your needs will be taken care of, and you can stay in the house that you live in, you can farm the land that you in the area which you live, and those sort of boundaries and stuff like that are respected. It's just that I don't see that statism as a form. I don't see statism as a form of achieving communism, because statism exists for the continuation of the state. It doesn't exist for it may call itself communist. It may be good and moral and virtuous, but as long as it's statist, it's not really communist. And I think that we need to first create a stateless society, and then convince the individuals within the community that communism is the way to go, and communism by free association, not communism with a gun pointed at their head. Anyway, I'd like to get your ideas as to what you think. I totally believe that these individual Chinese communities did create full communism, but again, here comes the corrupting influence of the state. You have government that exists for the purpose of the continuation of itself, and as long as you have government as the motivator for communism, you'll never really have true communism. And respond back if you could. I'd like to hear it, but I really respect you. I like a lot of your videos. I agree with probably about 95% of what you have to say. I'm not a big fan of really any communist leaders, with the exception of Mao. I do actually really respect Chairman Mao, But thanks. Have a good one. Bye. Bye.